You must
9 years
understand how
after his
serious
son's
this is.
death,
We
a
can't afford
strange
any
dream
mistakes.
jolts Ethan Rourke awake. In it,
It's all right,
Lucas
pal.
stands by a lakeshore, calling him Dad for the first time since childhood. Then turns away, leaving behind a child who stares at Ethan with eyes he cannot forget. Ethan Rourke shot upright, cold sweat clinging to his collar. 3:14 a.m. Seattle lay outside his windows like a dark sheet of glass, streaked with thin ribbons of rain. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the city far below, too distant to make him feel any less alone. He sat still for a moment, breathing hard, as if his heart had just sprinted through a forest full of ghosts. The dream was too vivid, too sharp, as if the cold wind from that lakeshore still lingered beneath his ribs. Lucas. And the child behind him. Ethan lifted a trembling hand to his face. 9 years. 9 years since the day his son, a gentle minimalist painter who preferred sunlight and silence over skyscrapers, died in a train accident near Tacoma. But grief does not age. It sleeps lightly, waiting for a sound, a scent, a memory to wake it again. His penthouse, perched on the 60th floor, felt more like an abandoned observatory than a home. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of the sleeping city, yet tonight, the world outside looked unreal, like a place he'd once lived but no longer belonged to. Ethan rose and switched on the small amber light above the minibar. The glow revealed the silver strands in his hair, the hollows beneath his cheekbones, carved by years of insomnia and regret. His eyes, once sharp enough to unnerve entire boardrooms, now held something entirely different, an ache without a name. Every year on this day, the anniversary of Lucas's death, he abandoned all meetings, avoided all calls, and drove 2 hours to Evergreen Rest Cemetery, to sit beside the only place where he could still speak to his son. But this year, the dream had unsettled him. In it, Lucas didn't glare at him, didn't turn away in pain or disappointment. He simply looked at Ethan, deeply, almost gently, as if wanting to say something he never had the chance to say while alive. But the child, those eyes. Ethan's chest tightened, the image refusing to fade. By 6 o'clock a.m., the rain had thinned, turning into a soft mist that coated the glass like breath. Ethan slipped on a dark coat and picked up a single white lily, Lucas's favorite since childhood. Its fragrance was light, almost shy, the same scent Lucas used to describe as sunlight trapped in petals. When he stepped into the private elevator, the mirrored walls caught his reflection. A 56-year-old man stared back. A man who once commanded empires of satellites and towers, now hollowed by the simplest of human tragedies. Absence. Absence as a father. Absence at the moments that mattered. Absence until there was nothing left to return to. The elevator doors slid open, delivering him into the underground garage. His SUV's engine purred to life, and he started the familiar drive toward Tacoma. He did not play the radio, did not check the news. He simply drove, gripping the steering wheel like a lifeline. The road cut through clusters of gray pine trees, each wet with morning fog. The world felt muted, as if nature itself were holding its breath for him. When he reached the outskirts of Olympia, dawn began to spill slowly across the sky. Small bakeries opened their shutters. A woman jogged past with a dog whose collar jingled. Life went on, oblivious to the storm turning inside Ethan's chest. Finally, he turned onto the narrow lane leading to Evergreen Rest, a place he both dreaded and needed. The cemetery stretched across gentle hills, each headstone softened by moss and time. Mist curled around the bases of old cedar trees. A breeze passed through, making the branches whisper like distant voices. Ethan stepped out and held the lily more tightly than he intended. He walked the familiar stone path, counting the seconds in his head just to steady himself. But then, halfway up the slope, he stopped. He heard it. Crying. Not polite weeping. Not a mourner's soft sniffles. But raw, broken sobs, the kind that seem ripped out from deep inside someone who has carried too much for too long. Ethan took a few hesitant steps forward, then froze completely. Under the shadow of a tall cedar directly in front of Lucas's headstone. A young man in a groundskeeper's uniform knelt on the wet grass, shoulders shaking, face buried in both hands. And beside him, a boy, maybe 8 years old, sat quietly building a ring of small stones at the base of Lucas's grave. The boy lifted his head. Their eyes met, and the world fell silent. Blue eyes, bright, deep, familiar. Speckled with tiny flecks of gold near the iris. Just like Lucas at 17, the day he told Ethan he wanted to live a life not measured by profit. A cold jolt shot through Ethan's spine. The lily slipped from his hand and landed softly on the wet earth. The boy tilted his head slightly, studying him, curious, calm, almost knowing. Then a tiny, fragile smile flickered across his lips. Ethan couldn't breathe, because this child, this stranger, had Lucas's eyes. And in that suspended moment with the mist curling around their feet, Ethan Rourke understood one thing with terrifying clarity. His life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The morning wind still carried a cold bite as Ethan Rourke stood frozen before Lucas's grave, unable to tear his eyes away from the boy who looked back at him with the same unmistakable eyes he once saw in his son. The moment stretched thin, like a violin string pulled so tight it might snap with one more breath. The boy, with soft brown hair and a woolen jacket slightly too big for him, tilted his head. There was no fear in his gaze, just quiet curiosity, and something faintly familiar, like the echo of a memory Ethan had forgotten he possessed. Ethan swallowed hard. Who are you, kid? The question jolted the kneeling man. He flinched, shoulders stiffening as if struck by a physical blow. Slowly he lifted his face, streaked with tears, raw with emotion, and scrambled to his feet too fast, nearly tripping over the patch of wildflowers by the grave. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, trying to steady himself. I'm sorry. I didn't expect anyone to come this early. His voice cracked. The blue name tag on his chest read, Joel Mercer. Ethan's gaze didn't soften. Why were you crying? At my son's grave? His voice thickened.
And that boy, who is he?
Joel glanced toward the child, who was now carefully arranging small stones into a perfect circle, humming softly as if the world were calm and simple. Silence swept through the cemetery like a slow-moving fog. Then Joel exhaled, a long, heavy breath of someone carrying a weight he never meant to reveal. I come here to visit Lucas, he said quietly. Ethan stepped forward, his pulse tightening. You knew Lucas. Joel nodded once. I was his friend. And more than that. More than that? Ethan repeated sharply. His voice trembled between confusion and dread. Joel hesitated. Then he placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. Aiden, sweetheart, why don't you go over to the field and find a few more stones? I'll be right here. The boy nodded cheerfully. Okay. I'll get the nice gray ones. He ran off toward the grassy clearing, his small footsteps pattering softly over the damp earth. Only when Aiden was far enough away did Joel finally turn back, his voice lowered to a whisper that somehow felt louder than thunder. Aiden is Lucas's son. The words hit Ethan like a blow to the chest. He stumbled back, one hand gripping the trunk of the cedar tree for balance. For a moment, he couldn't draw breath. His mind went white, empty, stunned into stillness. "That's impossible," he rasped. "Lucas never told me anything. Not once." Joel looked at him with a painful kind of sympathy, because Lucas knew you wouldn't be ready to hear it. Ethan felt pierced, sharply, deeply, by a truth he'd spent years avoiding. He thought he had lost his son to fate. But now a darker realization crept forward. Maybe he had lost Lucas long before the accident, when he stopped being present, stopped listening, stopped asking who Lucas really was. His knees weakened. Joel continued softly. "The boy's mother was Elena Harper. She died in a storm 8 years ago. Lucas raised Aiden alone for about a year, until the train accident." Ethan pressed a hand to his forehead. "So after my son died, the boy lived with me," Joel said. "I was Lucas's closest friend, and I promised him I would take care of Aiden, no matter what." Ethan's throat tightened. "Why did no one tell me?" Joel's jaw flexed. Anger, grief, exhaustion, all tangled together. "Lucas tried," he said. "He called, he sent letters, but you were always traveling, always in meetings, always unreachable." He met Ethan's gaze without flinching. "You were a hard man for anyone to reach." The words sliced deep, because they weren't spoken with spite, just truth. Ethan looked out at the boy again. Aiden was kneeling in the grass, digging through stones with intense concentration, the morning sun shimmering on his hair. Ethan whispered, "His eyes. He has Lucas's eyes." Joel's expression softened. "Aiden isn't just Lucas's son," he murmured. "He's the best part of Lucas and Elena, left behind in one small body." Aiden ran back at full speed, breathless, cheeks pink from the cold. "Joel, look! I've found so many pretty stones!" Then he turned to Ethan, still smiling innocently. "And who are you, mister?" Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He felt a pressure in his chest so sharp it almost burned. Joel knelt beside Aiden. "Aiden, this man is someone very important to your father." The boy blinked slowly. "Was he Dad's friend?" Joel hesitated. A long moment passed, a moment heavy enough to tilt their entire world. Finally, with a steady voice, he said, "This is your grandfather." Aiden stood very still. The air went perfectly silent. Grandfather. A word Ethan had never imagined would belong to him. The boy studied his face again, searching, unsure, absorbing the revelation piece by piece. "Really?" His voice trembled slightly. "Is that true, Joel?" Joel nodded gently. The boy took a tiny step toward Ethan. "If you're my grandpa—" He paused, frowning in that same thoughtful way Lucas used to. "How come I never met you before?" The question struck Ethan like a blade. He swallowed hard. "Because," he said hoarsely, "I never knew your father had a child, and by the time I understood, it was already too late to ask him." Aiden held his gaze for a long moment, then slowly placed a small gray stone into Ethan's palm. "It's okay," he whispered. "I can show you how to build a stone circle for Dad, if you want." Something inside Ethan cracked wide open. He nodded, voice shaking. "I would like that, very much." Aiden took his hand, small, warm, impossibly forgiving, and pulled him gently toward Lucas's headstone. Joel stood back, watching the two figures kneel side by side. His eyes held surprise, concern, hope. And something else, a fragile belief that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something neither he nor Ethan could have foreseen. For the first time in years, Ethan Rourke didn't feel like turning away. He felt pulled toward a truth he should have known all along, and toward a child who carried the last light of his son's life. The wind quieted, as if even the trees were listening. Aiden knelt beside Ethan, carefully placing the small gray stones into a neat circle. His tiny fingers moved with a seriousness that did not match his age, deliberate, gentle, as though he understood that grief had to be handled the same way one handled fragile glass. Ethan watched him, heart pounding, every breath feeling too big and too small all at once. His grandson. The word still felt foreign, like a language he had once known but forgotten. Joel stood a few steps away, arms folded loosely, eyes lowered. The quiet between the three of them stretched out like a thin sheet, delicate, trembling, waiting for the inevitable tear. Aiden placed the last stone, dusted off his hands, and smiled. There. Now Dad has a perfect circle. He looked up at Ethan with Lucas's eyes. Do circles make people happier in heaven? The question, simple, sincere, cut Ethan open in a way he wasn't prepared for. Before he could find his voice, Joel spoke. Why don't you go find a pine cone for Dad too, buddy? The big ones he liked. Aiden nodded eagerly and jogged toward the trees. Joel waited until the boy was out of earshot. Then he let out a long, unsteady breath. You deserve to know everything, he said quietly. About Lucas, about Elena, about the life they built without you. Ethan braced himself. There was no softness in this kind of truth, only the kind that scraped raw, peeling away the illusions he'd wrapped around himself for years. Joel's gaze softened with memory. Lucas and I met in high school, he began. He was the quiet kid who always sketched in the margins of his notebooks. I was the kid who skipped class to work part-time at a wood shop. We were opposites, but somehow we understood each other. He paused. Your son wasn't unhappy, Mr. Rourke. He was unseen. Ethan felt those words slam into him like a wave hitting rock. Unseen. A word he had earned more than he wished to admit. Joel continued. When Lucas was 22, he met Elena Harper. She was a preschool teacher, soft-spoken, always humming little songs she made up herself. She carried warmth the way some people carry umbrellas, always ready to shelter whoever walked beside her. A faint smile touched Joel's lips, tinted with sadness. They fell in love faster than either of them expected. Lucas used to come to my workshop and talk about her for hours. He told me once that with her, he felt safe. Safe. Another word Ethan had rarely offered. Joel shifted his weight, voice lowering. Lucas was terrified to tell you. Ethan's chest tightened. Tell me what? Joel's eyes met his. That he wanted to live a simple life. That he didn't want the company or the money. He wanted art, sunlight, a little cabin near a lake, and Elena. Ethan felt something fracture inside him, something old, rigid, inherited. Joel continued carefully, as though placing stones on a scale. Lucas said he spent his whole childhood trying to be what you wanted. Even when it hurt him? Ethan whispered. Especially then, Joel said. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of all the things Ethan now wished he had asked, wished he had seen, wished he had understood before it was too late. Joel's gaze drifted beyond Ethan, toward the road leading into the cemetery. Then Elena got pregnant. Those 4 words left Ethan breathless. Pregnant. His son had been a father before him, and he had never known. Was Lucas happy? Ethan asked, voice breaking. Joel nodded. Terrified, but happy. He used to hold Elena's belly while she slept and whisper stories of all the things he wanted to teach his kid. He didn't care if it was a boy or a girl. He just wanted, Joel swallowed, to be better than he felt his own father had been. Ethan shut his eyes. That sentence didn't just cut, it carved. Joel reached into his jacket pocket. There's something you need to see. He handed Ethan a worn, creased envelope, edges softened by years, corners bent, the paper yellowing around the folds. Ethan felt heat flood his chest. His name was written on the front. Ethan. Not Dad. Not even Father. Just Ethan. Joel said quietly, Lucas wrote that letter 3 days before the accident. He planned to give it to you after Aiden's first birthday. He was working up the courage. Ethan held the letter like it was a living thing. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside was Lucas's handwriting, the handwriting Ethan had not seen since his son was in middle school, back when he still left little drawings on the fridge in hopes his father would notice. Ethan began to read. Dad, then crossed out. Ethan. I don't know how to start this, but maybe starting is all that matters. I have a son. His name is Aiden, and he is the best thing I've ever done with my life. He has Elena's smile, and he has your eyes. I don't know how to feel about that. I want you to meet him one day, not because you owe me anything, but because I don't want him to grow up thinking love is something you chase. I want him to know it's something you show. I'm still learning that myself. I don't expect us to fix everything. I just hope, maybe, we can start again. If not for me, then for him. Lucas. The words blurred before Ethan even reached the end. He folded the letter with trembling fingers, pressing it against his chest as if that might somehow collapse 9 years of distance, 9 years of silence, 9 years of everything left unsaid. Joel's voice broke the stillness. Lucas wanted you in Aiden's life. He said everyone deserves a second chance. Ethan wiped at his face, an action he hadn't done in front of another adult for decades. But I wasn't there. You didn't know, Joel replied gently. I should have, Ethan whispered. Joel didn't argue. Some truths needed no debate. Aiden came running back just then, holding a large pine cone above his head like a trophy. Look, Grandpa! The word punched right into Ethan's heart. Joel's eyebrows rose, surprised that the boy said it so naturally. Aiden placed the pine cone at the top of the stone circle, then looked up. Dad liked trees, he said proudly. So I give him a tree gift. Ethan knelt beside him. It's beautiful, he said. His voice cracked on the last syllable. Aiden studied his face, concerned. Are you sad? Ethan nodded softly. Yes. But I'm also very happy to meet you. Aiden leaned forward, small arms wrapping around Ethan's neck in a spontaneous hug. A hug he did not deserve. A hug he never expected. A hug that felt like forgiveness he had not earned. Joel watched, torn between protectiveness and hope. This moment, This fragile, trembling moment felt like the beginning of something neither man fully understood yet. But both could feel it. A door had opened, a past had resurfaced, and a future, unknown, complicated, and astonishingly beautiful, had just taken its first breath. The sun had climbed higher now, melting the last traces of mist from the cemetery grounds. Ethan stood beside Lucas's grave long after Aiden's pine cone rested atop the stone circle, long after the boy had run off chasing a squirrel across the grass. Joel waited quietly beside him. There was no rush in his posture, only the heavy patience of someone who had carried a truth alone for far too long. At last, Ethan managed to speak. His voice was rough, scraped raw. "Joel, may I see him again?" Joel looked at him carefully, not with suspicion, not with hostility, but with the wary caution of someone responsible for a fragile heart that had already weathered too many storms. "Aiden isn't used to strangers," he said softly. "And you're not just a stranger, you're—" He paused, searching for the right word. "The missing piece." The phrase hit Ethan in the chest. "I don't want to overwhelm him," Ethan said quickly, his hands clenched. "I don't want to force anything. He struggled for breath. "I want to know him, not the idea of him, not the guilt of missing him. Him." Joel's eyes flickered. Surprise first, then something gentler. "It has to be somewhere open," Joel murmured. "He gets anxious in crowded places. The world has not always been kind to him." Ethan nodded immediately. "Wherever he feels safest." Joel thought for a moment. "There's a lakeside park in Olympia, Long Meadow Lake. Aiden loves it there. It's quiet, lots of room to run, and trees he believes whisper stories." Ethan felt his throat tighten again. "Could we meet there?" Joel didn't answer right away. He watched Aiden from a distance. The boy had knelt down, giggling softly as he tried to balance a leaf on the squirrel's tail. The animal darted away, leaving Aiden laughing alone under the morning sun. Only then did Joel turn back. "I'll ask him," he said. "If he says yes, we go at his pace, his comfort." Ethan bowed his head. "Anything he needs." Joel studied him again. Longer this time. Deeper. "I'm not doing this for you," he said quietly. "I'm doing this for Aiden. He deserves to know where he comes from." Ethan nodded. There was no defense he could make that wouldn't sound like an excuse. "I understand." And he did, maybe for the first time in his life. Joel called that evening. Ethan had been sitting at his kitchen island, staring at the unopened bottle of mineral water in front of him like it might contain answers to the last decade of mistakes. He grabbed the phone before the second ring completed. "Joel?" "I talked to Aiden." Ethan's breath caught. "And?" There was a beat of silence on the other end. Not tense, just contemplative. "He wants to meet you," Joel said. "But he chose the place. The park. Saturday at 10. Ethan closed his eyes. He didn't remember the last time relief hurt. "I'll be there," he breathed. Saturday morning arrived cloaked in the colors of early autumn. Orange leaves brushing the pavement, the air crisp with the smell of pine and distant wood smoke. Ethan reached the lakeside park 20 minutes early. Typical. He'd always been early for everything. Meetings, appointments, flight schedules. But this wasn't about punctuality. It was fear. Fear of showing up late to something he didn't deserve. He walked along the wooden railing overlooking the lake. The water was dark glass, disturbed only by the slow glide of a duck and the distant splash of a dog leaping in after a stick. For the first time in years, Ethan felt small, not insignificant, just humbled. Footsteps approached from behind. He turned. Joel. And beside him, Aiden, in a bright orange jacket, hands tucked into the pockets, eyes scanning the world with quiet wonder. Ethan swallowed. Hard. "Aiden," he said gently, "do you remember me?" The boy nodded seriously. "You're my grandpa." Ethan's heart lurched. Joel nudged the boy lightly. "You can ask him what you asked me, buddy." Aiden turned, facing Ethan squarely. "Why do you want to see me again?" Of all questions, this was the one Ethan feared most. Not because it was harsh, but because it demanded a truth he hadn't spoken aloud. He crouched down so they were eye to eye. "Because you're a part of Lucas," Ethan said softly. "And because you're a part of me." Aiden frowned, thinking. "Did my dad miss you?" Ethan's breath shattered. "Yes," he whispered. "I didn't make it easy for him, but I know he missed me, and I missed him too. Every day." Aiden kicked at a pebble. "Joel said grown-ups sometimes don't say what they feel. That's why they get sad." Ethan's laugh was small, broken. "He's right." Aiden nodded, deciding that was enough. "Will you push me on the swing?" Ethan blinked. Yes, I'd love to." Aiden trotted off toward the swing set. Ethan followed, his legs unsteady, his heart unspooling with every step. Joel watched from a bench under a maple tree, cautiously at first, then with an expression that slowly softened. Aiden climbed onto a swing. Ethan stood behind him. "Ready?" "Higher," Aiden declared, gripping the chains. Ethan pushed gently at first, afraid of doing too much too fast, but Aiden squealed, "More!" Laughing, actually laughing, Ethan obliged, sending the boy soaring forward. Orange leaves flew around them like confetti, and Aiden's laughter rolled out into the open field, bright and unrestrained. The sound echoed through Ethan's chest, loosening years of silence. After a while, Aiden hopped off and ran to collect fallen leaves, arranging them by color, humming to himself. Joel joined Ethan at the railing overlooking the water. "He likes you," Joel said quietly. Ethan stared at the lake. "I don't know why he would." Joel shrugged. "Kids don't love with conditions. They love with instinct." Ethan exhaled. "I don't want to make the same mistakes." Joel nodded. "Then show up. That's all Aiden needs." Aiden ran back over, holding a handful of leaves. "Grandpa, can you help me make a dragon?" Ethan blinked. "A dragon?" Aiden nodded hard. "Dad used to make leaf dragons with me. He said stories live inside trees." Then he held out the leaves. "Will you make one with me?" Ethan knelt in the grass. "I'd be honored." Aiden grinned and dropped the leaves into his lap. Joel watched them arrange reds for the wings, yellows for the belly, browns for the spine. The boy's small hands darted confidently. Ethan's trembled, but tried. For nearly half an hour, the two of them pressed leaves into place, shaping the creature Lucas once taught his son to love. When they finished, Aiden whispered, "Dad would like it." Ethan didn't trust himself to speak. He simply nodded, eyes stinging. Aiden leaned lightly against him. Not clinging, not cautious, just present. Joel approached as the wind picked up. "We should head home soon," he said gently. Then he turned to Ethan. "If you'd like, we can meet again, next week." Ethan looked between Joel and Aiden. I would like that more than anything. Aiden lifted the leaf dragon toward him. Grandpa, can you keep this, so you don't forget today? Ethan's voice broke. I could never forget today. Aiden smiled. Joel placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, brief, hesitant, but real. Then let's build this slowly, Joel said. Together. And for the first time in 9 years, as the wind swept across the lake and scattered orange leaves around them like small blessings, Ethan felt something he had not felt since Lucas died. Hope. The next Saturday arrived with a pale morning sun peeking over the Olympia skyline, brushing the buildings with soft gold. Ethan stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, palms pressed against the cool glass, watching the city wake up. He was nervous. Ridiculously nervous. He, Ethan Rourke, the man who had negotiated billion-dollar contracts, confronted boards of directors, and reshaped urban skylines, could not steady his own breathing. Because today wasn't about business, or power, or anything he knew how to control. Today, Aiden was coming. Aiden, the boy who had Lucas's eyes and Elena's heart, and Joel, who had raised that boy with a tenderness Ethan didn't know how to give. He spent the morning doing something he hadn't done in 30 years. Cleaning. But not the cleaning a housekeeper performed twice a week. The kind that smelled like lemon polish and silence. This cleaning was different. He walked room to room, touching each object, asking himself, would this overwhelm Aiden? Would this feel cold? Would this feel like Lucas's world? Or mine? He removed the glass art sculpture from the coffee table. Too fragile. He placed a soft wool blanket over the leather sofa. Easier for a child. He set aside a collection of framed awards and replaced them with 3 simple photographs of Lucas at various ages. A toddler, a boy drawing superheroes, a teenager holding a paintbrush. He didn't even remember owning the photos. He found them in a drawer he rarely opened. A drawer that smelled like dust and regret. At 9:57, the private elevator dinged. Ethan's heart jerked. He opened the door before the bell rang. Joel stood there, wearing a navy jacket and jeans. His hair was tied back in a low ponytail. He looked slightly uncomfortable, adjusting the strap of his worn canvas bag. Beside him, Aiden clutched a sketchbook to his chest, the same sketchbook he always carried. Bright orange jacket, cheeks flushed from the chilly air. Aiden took 1 step inside, then stopped. His eyes widened. It's so tall, he whispered. Joel rested a hand on his shoulder. It's okay. We don't have to stay long if it feels too big. Ethan crouched down. You can leave any time you want, he said gently. But I'm very happy you're here. Aiden nodded, stepping farther inside, cautiously at first, then with curiosity, overtaking hesitation. Joel gave Ethan a tight smile. We can stay for an hour, maybe 2. We'll see how he does. Ethan nodded gratefully. Whenever you're ready. The penthouse was quiet, not in the cold way of echoing marble and empty rooms, but in the unfamiliar way of being alive for the first time in years. Aiden wandered toward the giant windows, pressing both hands against the glass. I can see everything, he exclaimed. Dad would love this view. The words pierced Ethan. He swallowed hard. He did love views, Ethan managed. He used to stand on balconies and stare at the sky like he was searching for something. Aiden nodded thoughtfully, as if storing the information. Joel studied Ethan from behind, quietly, carefully, noticing every crack in his composure. You have something you want to show him, Joel said softly. Ethan nodded. Yes, come with me. He led them down a hallway lined with soft lighting, stopping in front of a door he had not opened in a decade. He hesitated, then twisted the handle. Inside was a spacious study, except it did not feel like a study. It felt like a museum dedicated to someone Ethan never took the time to understand. Lucas. On the walls hung watercolor landscapes, rough charcoal portraits, unfinished acrylic abstracts, small, delicate sketches taped beside larger canvases. A shelf filled with tiny wooden figures. Lucas carved as a child, dust lay on some frames, but the colors underneath looked as alive as the day they were painted. Aiden entered slowly, his breath hitching. His small fingers lifted to his mouth as he stared, eyes wide. These are Dad's? Yes, Ethan whispered. Aiden walked toward a watercolor on the far wall, a lake surrounded by tall pines, sunlight reflecting off the water in shimmering peach tones. He reached out, stopping just short of touching the glass. He drew light so pretty. His voice wavered. Joel stepped beside him. Your dad always said drawing was how he breathed. Aiden blinked rapidly, tears gathering but not falling. Ethan moved closer, hands trembling slightly. There's more, he said softly. Over here. He opened a drawer and took out a small, battered box, wooden, edges chipped. Lucas carved it when he was 15. Inside were pencils worn to nubs, folded doodles of animals and stars, a tiny wooden bird, and a sketch of a baby wrapped in a blanket. Aiden froze. Is that me? Ethan nodded. He drew that the week you were born. Aiden reached for the sketch with both hands, holding it as if it might turn to dust. He was silent for a long moment. Then he whispered, He loved me. It wasn't a question, but it begged an answer. Ethan knelt in front of him. More than anything in the world, he said, voice breaking. Your dad loved you with all he had, and I wish I'd known him better. I wish I had been the father he deserved. Aiden looked at him with innocent confusion. Were you a mean dad? Ethan shook his head. No, I wasn't mean, just not there. Aiden tilted his head. Why? The hardest question of all. Ethan took a slow breath. Because I thought work was more important. I thought building big towers mattered more than small moments. He swallowed. I was wrong, Aiden. Very wrong. Aiden thought deeply, then stepped forward. He placed the sketch carefully on the table and wrapped his arms around Ethan's neck. A small, soft hug. Ethan's breath shattered. Joel turned away, blinking fast. Aiden whispered, I think Dad would want me to hug you. Ethan closed his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. That means everything. After a while, the three of them sat together on the floor, surrounded by Lucas's art. Aiden opened his sketchbook. Can I draw something? Of course, Ethan said. Aiden drew for several quiet minutes, small brow furrowed, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth in concentration. When he finished, he held it up. 3 figures. A tall man with gray hair, a boy with messy curls, and another man with long hair pulled back. They were holding hands beside a lake. Above them floated a bright, shining star. That's Dad, Aiden said, pointing to the star. He's watching us. Ethan didn't realize he was crying until Joel put a hand on his shoulder. A gentle, grounding touch. He'd be proud, Joel said softly, of both of you. Before they left, Aiden turned to Ethan. "Can we come again? I want to see more drawings." Ethan's voice cracked. "Anytime. This is your home too." Aiden nodded, satisfied. Joel hesitated at the door. "This place, it's a lot, but you handled today well." Ethan exhaled shakily. "I'm learning." Joel gave him a look. Not warm, not cold, but hopeful. "Then we'll keep going. Slowly. But we will." And when the elevator doors closed with Aiden waving through the crack, Ethan stood alone in the quiet penthouse. Except for the first time in decades, it didn't feel lonely. It felt like a home finally waking up. A home with ghosts, yes, but also with something new. Possibility. Winter arrived quietly. It came not with storms or snow, but with the subtle tightening of the wind, the scent of rain in the early mornings, and the way the sky dimmed a little faster each day. Olympia shifted colors like an aging photograph. Colder, softer, muted. Aiden, too, changed with the season. He laughed more easily now. He drew constantly. He skipped rather than walked. At school, Miss Thompson reported he was raising his hand in class, offering to help younger students zip their coats, even inviting 2 shy classmates to paint with him at recess. "He's blooming," she told Joel one afternoon, her eyes warm. "Whatever's happening at home, it's helping." And it was. Because every week, Ethan showed up. Not with gifts, not with extravagance, but with presence. He learned that Aiden liked his hot chocolate not too hot, and his sandwiches with the crusts, but cut in triangles. He learned that Aiden was terrible at soccer, but brilliant at building leaf creatures. He learned that Aiden talked to trees when he thought no one was watching. And slowly, Aiden began leaning into him, literally leaning, small shoulder against Ethan's arm whenever they sat together. It broke Ethan in the most tender way. But beneath the comforting rhythm of their new connection, something else simmered quietly. Joel's exhaustion. At first, Ethan noticed small things. A stumble on the steps, the way Joel rubbed his temples during dinner, the growing stack of bills on the kitchen counter. But Joel brushed everything off with a smile that fooled neither of them. "I'm fine. Just tired." "It's nothing." It wasn't nothing. And soon, it became something neither of them could ignore. One rainy Thursday, Ethan arrived at Joel's apartment to take Aiden ice skating. He knocked, waited, then knocked again. Aiden answered the door, breathless and worried. "Grandpa, Joel's sick." Ethan's blood froze. He stepped inside. Joel lay on the couch, one arm draped across his forehead, his breathing shallow. Sweat dampened his shirt. His normally warm complexion was pale, almost gray. "Joel?" Ethan knelt beside him. Joel opened his eyes, dazed and unfocused. "It's just a cold," he mumbled. But it wasn't. His skin was burning with fever. Aiden hovered near the couch, eyes glossy with fear. "He said not to tell you," he whispered. "But he keeps getting dizzy." Ethan felt a surge of something old but unfamiliar. Instinct, protectiveness, responsibility. "Aiden," he said gently, "go get your jacket. We're taking Joel to the hospital." Joel tried to sit up. "No. I need to pick up extra hours this week. I can't afford—" Ethan placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Stop." One word, calm but absolute. "You're going." Joel looked at him, tired, embarrassed, afraid of being a burden. "I don't want charity." Ethan shook his head. "This isn't charity. This is family." Joel's lips parted. a rebuttal forming, but he was too weak to voice it. Ethan helped him up gently, supporting most of his weight as Aiden ran to grab his stuffed fox and clutched it tightly to his chest. They drove through the rain, the sky a sheet of gray. Aiden held Joel's hand in the back seat, whispering, "It's okay. Grandpa's here." And Joel, stubborn, proud Joel, closed his eyes and let himself lean into the comfort. At the hospital, things escalated fast. Doctors took one look at Joel's vitals and moved him into an urgent care room. Severe respiratory infection, dangerous fever, dehydration. He needed IV fluids, medication, and monitoring. Aiden squeezed Ethan's hand so tightly his fingers went numb. "He's gonna be okay, right?" the boy whispered. Ethan knelt in front of him. "Yes," he said firmly, choosing truth without panic. "He's sick, but he's strong, and he's getting the help he needs." Aiden nodded slowly, trying to believe it. Hours passed. The rain tapped against the window in steady, persistent rhythms. Ethan sat beside Aiden, letting the boy curl up against him, head resting on Ethan's lap. Aiden fell asleep halfway through a cartoon on Ethan's phone. And as the room dimmed with evening shadows, Ethan looked at Joel, pale, hooked to IV lines, finally resting, and felt something heavy settle into his chest. Guilt, recognition, realization. Joel had carried everything alone for 9 years. 9 years of rent, 9 years of child rearing. 9 years of bills and exhaustion and fear. Ethan had been alive and wealthy during all of it, and he had been nowhere. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, palms pressed to his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Not to Joel, not to anyone, but to the space around him, to the universe that had watched him blindly step past entire chapters of his son's life. A quiet voice stirred beside him. "Grandpa?" Aiden was awake, blinking sleep from his eyes. "Yes?" The boy hesitated. "If something happened to Joel, would I—" He swallowed hard. "Would I have to go away?" Ethan froze. Aiden continued, voice small. "When Dad died, Joel promised I'd never lose him too. But what if—" He looked at Joel, then back at Ethan. "What if Joel's gone one day? Where would I go?" Ethan felt the question like a blade. He took Aiden's tiny hands in his own. "Listen to me," Ethan said, voice steady despite the ache in it. "You will never go anywhere alone. Not ever. Joel isn't leaving you, and neither am I." Aiden studied him, searching for cracks in the promise. Finding none, he nodded. "Okay." He leaned against Ethan's shoulder, small and trusting. Ethan wrapped an arm around him. A silent vow formed inside him, fierce, immovable. He would never let this boy feel abandoned again. Joel woke the next morning with clearer eyes, exhausted but stable. Ethan brought him water as the doctor explained the plan. 2 nights of observation, medications, rest. When the doctor left, Joel stared at the ceiling. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Ethan frowned. "For what?" "For being inconvenient." Aiden gasped. "Joel!" "You are not inconvenient!" Ethan nodded firmly. "He's right. Don't ever say that again." Joel looked away, ashamed. Ethan lowered his voice. "You've carried everything. Alone. That ends now." Joel blinked. "I don't want your money." "I'm not offering money," Ethan said. He placed a hand on the railing of the hospital bed. "I'm offering partnership." Joel stared at him, surprised. Partnership? Aiden deserves two adults working together, not one collapsing and one apologizing. Joel's face softened. And you? You think you can do that? After all these years? Ethan breathed deeply. I don't know, he admitted. But I'm going to learn. Joel looked toward Aiden, who was drawing a crooked hospital bed with smiley faces. A quiet sigh escaped him. Okay, Joel said. We'll try. That evening, as Aiden slept in a chair beside Joel's bed, Joel said quietly, He loves you, you know. Ethan swallowed. I didn't earn that. Joel shook his head. Kids don't care about earning. They care about presence. And you're here. Ethan looked at the boy. Messy curls, tiny fists, soft breaths. A fragile miracle. I won't let him down, Ethan whispered. Joel nodded once. Then don't. Outside, the rain eased and a weak band of sunlight spilled through the blinds. A beginning. Small, imperfect, but unmistakably real. Joel was discharged 2 days later. The morning light slanted through the hospital blinds, pale and cold, touching the room with the gentlest possible hand. Joel sat on the edge of the bed, fastening the buttons of his flannel shirt. His movements were slow, a quiet reminder that recovery was a path, not a switch. Aiden hovered beside him, clutching his stuffed fox so tightly its seams strained. Are you still sick? He asked. Joel ruffled the boy's hair. Getting better, bud. Just need rest, soup, and a week without climbing ladders or lifting heavy things. Aiden nodded, but his eyes said, I'm still scared. Ethan entered with a warm coat draped over his arm. Ready? He asked. His voice was soft, careful, like he was approaching a fragile creature he didn't want to startle. Joel agreed reluctantly. Ethan carried the discharge papers, the medication bag, even Joel's worn canvas pack slung over his shoulder. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't paternalistic. It was simply help. Something Joel had refused for years, and something Ethan had never offered before. As they walked to the parking lot, Aiden held Joel's hand with one small fist and clung to Ethan's sleeve with the other. Between them, the boy looked like a bridge, a fragile one, a necessary one. Back at the apartment, the air smelled of dust and lavender detergent. Ethan had tidied while Joel was hospitalized, stacking dishes, sweeping the floor, refolding blankets. Not perfectly, not professionally, but earnestly. Joel glanced around in surprise. You cleaned? Ethan shrugged, embarrassed. Didn't want you coming back to a mess. Joel gave him a look, not gratitude exactly, but something warmer than suspicion. Aiden rushed to his room to fetch crayons. I'm drawing us as superheroes, he yelled from down the hall. Grandpa is Sky Man because he stands tall. Joel is Captain Soup because he needs soup. Joel groaned. Captain Soup? Really? Ethan chuckled. I've heard worse titles. For a moment, the room felt light. Then it shifted. Because that afternoon, the doorbell rang, and the sound pressed into the apartment like a cold gust. Joel frowned. Expecting someone? Ethan's stomach tightened. He already knew. He opened the door. Ethan Rourke stood there. Tall, poised, wrapped in an expensive coat, her red hair swept into a low chignon. She looked older, yes, but not worn. If anything, time had sharpened her, carved her into something both formidable and fragile. Her eyes flicked past Ethan into the modest apartment. Where is she? Catherine demanded. Not cold, not angry, just trembling with urgency. Ethan stepped aside. "Catherine, please, gently." But she was already walking in. Joel stiffened instantly, instinctively placing his body between her and Aiden's room. Catherine froze. Joel froze too. They locked eyes, protectiveness meeting desperation. "You must be Joel," Catherine said softly. Her voice carried a cracked edge. "I'm Catherine, Isabel's mother." Joel's posture eased, not with trust, but with recognition of pain. "Aiden's in his room," he said quietly. "He's drawing." Catherine closed her eyes briefly. A muscle in her jaw quivered. Ethan touched her arm. "Let me talk to Aiden first." But the boy had already heard the voices. He stepped into the hallway, crayons still in hand. His curls were messy, his eyes wide. He stared at Catherine, a stranger who stared back with trembling breath. Catherine knelt slowly, as if approaching a deer she feared might bolt. "Hello, sweetheart," she whispered. I'm your grandma." Aiden clutched his fox tightly. He looked at Joel, then at Ethan, then at Catherine. "Did my mom have your hair?" Catherine nodded, tears gathering. "Yes, she did." Aiden stepped closer. One small step. "Did she smile like you?" Catherine's voice broke. "Exactly like me." Silence. Heavy. Tender. Impossible. Then Aiden lifted his drawing, superheroes, and handed it to her. "Do you want to see my dad's star?" he asked solemnly. "It's the brightest because he watches us." Catherine covered her mouth. She nodded, unable to speak, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Joel watched with softened shoulders. Ethan exhaled, relief and sorrow tangling in him like vines. For the first time that day, the tension loosened. But the peace didn't last long. Later, while Aiden and Catherine were drawing together at the kitchen table, Joel stepped onto the balcony to breathe. Ethan joined him. The winter air carried a muted sting, smelling faintly of rain. "I didn't expect her to show up today," Joel said without turning. "She's been trying to see Aiden," Ethan replied carefully. "But she and we have a complicated past." Joel scoffed lightly. "Seems like everyone in your family has complicated pasts." Ethan didn't deny it. He stood beside Joel, folding his hands against the railing. "You think I made a mistake letting her come?" Joel shook his head. "No. Aiden deserves to know her." He paused. "But things are shifting fast, Ethan. Too fast. Aiden's starting to ask questions I don't know how to answer." Ethan's chest tightened. "What kind of questions?" Joel hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Who his real family is." The wind stilled. Ethan turned sharply. "Joel." "He's confused," Joel continued. "And confusion is dangerous for kids like him. His world has always been simple. Me and him. Now it's me, him, you, your ex-wife, your skyscraper empire, your past." He exhaled shakily. "I'm trying to protect him, but the ground is shifting under his feet." Ethan felt the truth in his words, felt the guilt, the responsibility, the ache. "Tell me how to help," Ethan said softly. Joel looked at him, long, searching, then spoke with raw honesty. "Don't disappear." The words pierced deeper than accusation. "Kids don't trust promises," Joel said. "They trust patterns." Ethan swallowed. "I won't disappear. Joel nodded once. Then let's do this together. They returned inside to find Catherine reading Aiden's sketchbook, tears silently slipping down her face as Aiden explained each drawing. Aiden touched her sleeve gently. Are you crying because you miss Mom? Catherine nodded. Every day, sweetheart. Aiden leaned against her, small and brave. I miss her too, but she watches me. Joel says people you love never really go away. They just move. Up. Catherine's breath trembled. She gathered him into her arms. Joel watched from a distance. Ethan felt his heart twist. Regret and relief tangled together. And in that cramped living room, full of mismatched furniture, crayon drawings, the smell of hospital disinfectant on Joel's clothes, something remarkable formed. A broken family trying, struggling, choosing to come together. Not neatly, not easily, but earnestly. Aiden looked up, suddenly bright. Can we all go to the lake this weekend? Grandpa, Joel, Grandma, and me? Joel froze. Catherine froze. Ethan looked at both of them, then knelt so he was eye level with the boy. If that's what you want, then yes. All of us. Aiden grinned. I think Dad would like that. The adults shared a glance. Uneasy, unexpected, full of unspoken questions. But something else flickered beneath it. Hope. Because despite everything, despite fractures, grief, distance, guilt, and years of silence, there was a child who believed family could be rebuilt, and sometimes that belief is enough to begin. The lake shimmered like brushed steel beneath the late winter sun, cold, quiet, and impossibly still. A thin veil of mist drifted above the water, giving the morning a soft, dreamlike quality. Tall pines circled the lake in a protective embrace, their branches whispering in the breeze. Aiden skipped along the gravel path, one hand clutching Joel's fingers, the other holding a paper bag filled with snacks Catherine brought. His curls bounced with each step. Come on! We're slow! He called over his shoulder. Ethan smiled, following at a slower pace beside Catherine. She wore a wool coat and boots that were clearly not meant for uneven forest paths, but she walked anyway, silent determination in every step. Joel walked a few paces ahead, calm but watchful, his posture subtly protective. The four of them together made an unlikely picture. A child, his guardian, his grandfather, his grandmother, and an entire history of fractures held together by a boy's simple wish. When they reached the lakeshore, Aiden spun around. This is the place where the trees whisper stories. Joel laughed softly. Only if you listen long enough. Ethan knelt beside Aiden. What stories do you think they tell? Aiden pressed a finger to his chin thoughtfully. Stories about Dad, and Mom, and us. That quieted everyone. Even the trees seemed to pause. Joel spread a blanket near the water's edge. Catherine unpacked fruit, crackers, a thermos of warm cider. Aiden chased geese, who chased him right back. Ethan stood near the dock, watching the boy, hands tucked deep into his coat pockets. Catherine stepped beside him. He's grown so much, she murmured. He has, Ethan replied. For a moment, the two ex-spouses stood shoulder to shoulder, not as enemies, not as memories, but as two people watching the continuation of a life they both failed at in different ways. Ethan, Catherine said quietly, I'm trying to understand why Lucas never came to us, why he kept Aiden a secret, why... Her voice cracked. Ethan stared at the lake. He was afraid, he said. Afraid of us, of disappointing us,
of not being enough. Catherine's eyes glistened. We failed him. Ethan exhaled slowly. Yes, we did. It hurt to say it, but pretending otherwise hurt more. Later, Aiden tugged Joel's sleeve. Can we go to the cabin? Joel blinked. What cabin? Aiden pointed to the far side of the lake. The little one. Dad used to bring me here. With Elena. The world stopped. Ethan's heart thudded. Catherine covered her mouth. Joel's jaw tightened. Aiden, Joel said carefully, kneeling. Sweetheart, what do you mean your dad brought you here? Aiden blinked innocently. We came before, when I was really little. Joel swallowed. Can you show us? Aiden nodded happily and marched ahead. Ethan felt his legs stiffen. Joel, he whispered. Lucas never told me he had a cabin. Did he tell you? Joel shook his head slowly. No. Catherine's breath faltered. My God, he hid so much. They followed Aiden along a narrow trail winding through pines and moss-covered stones. The air smelled of damp bark, earth, and something old, a quiet warmth left behind by a life that never fully unfolded. Aiden walked confidently, as though his small feet remembered. After 15 minutes, the trees parted. There it stood. A small, weather-worn cabin made of cedar, nestled between two towering firs. The windows were dusty, the door slightly crooked, the porch steps softened by time. But it was still standing, still breathing, a forgotten piece of Lucas's life. Ethan stepped forward with trembling hands. Joel tested the door. It creaked open. Inside was dim light filtered through dirty curtains. Dust motes floated like suspended memories. The air felt thick, untouched. A wood stove, a small table with 2 chairs, an old paint-stained blanket draped over a couch, shelves lined with sketchbooks, coffee mugs, crayons. Aiden ran inside, smiling. See, Grandpa? I remember the red carpet. It wasn't a carpet, just a red rug with faded threads. Ethan's knees nearly buckled. Joel pressed a hand to his mouth, overwhelmed. Catherine stood in the doorway, tears falling freely. He lived here, she whispered. Our son lived here. Ethan opened one of the sketchbooks. Inside were pages and pages of drawings, of Aiden as a baby, of Lucas holding Elena's hand, of the lake at sunset, of the cabin itself bathed in light. But halfway through, Ethan found something else. A drawing of him. Not flattering, not cruel, just honest. A tall man standing on a balcony with his back turned, while a small boy held up a sketch behind him, unnoticed. Ethan closed the sketchbook. The air inside the cabin tightened around his chest. Joel approached. You okay? Ethan shook his head, voice trembling. He was hurting. Joel rested a hand on his shoulder. He was trying to find peace. Catherine sat on the couch, her eyes landing on a mug with chipped paint. We never knew our son, she whispered. Not really. Ethan forced a breath. But we can know him through Aiden. Joel nodded gently. Catherine nodded too, wiping a tear. Aiden had climbed onto the couch and was flipping through another sketchbook, giggling. Dad drew a dragon made of trees. Ethan sat beside him. He loved dragons, didn't he? Aiden nodded proudly. He said dragons protect people, even when you can't see them. Ethan's heart cracked open. He touched the page softly. Then he's still protecting you. Aiden leaned against him. Do you miss Dad? Ethan closed his eyes. Every day, Aiden nodded. Joel says missing means love stays even when people go. Ethan swallowed. Joel is a wise man. Aiden whispered, "So are you." Ethan flinched. He was not wise. He was learning the hard way. Joel sat across from them, watching. His eyes softened, sympathy without pity, understanding without judgment. But the moment shattered when Catherine spoke. "Ethan, why didn't we try harder?" Ethan froze. Joel stiffened. Aiden looked between them. Catherine's voice cracked. "Why didn't we go after him? Why didn't we fight for our son?" The cabin pulsed with silence. Ethan forced himself to meet her eyes. "Because we didn't know how," he whispered. "We thought love was something that would wait." Catherine shook her head. "And it didn't." The truth rippled through the room like a wave. Aiden felt it, even if he didn't fully understand it. He tugged Ethan's hand. "Grandpa?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "Are you sad because Dad lived here and didn't tell you?" Joel inhaled sharply. Ethan's chest tightened. He knelt so he was eye level with the boy. "I'm sad because I didn't make it easy for him to tell me." Aiden considered that. Then, without hesitation, he wrapped his arms around Ethan's neck. "It's okay. You're here now." Ethan pressed his forehead against Aiden's shoulder, trembling. Catherine turned away, silently crying. Joel exhaled slowly, his own eyes glossy. They spent the rest of the day cleaning the cabin, gently, reverently. Aiden swept the porch. Catherine wiped the dusty windows. Joel fixed the crooked door. Ethan sorted through the sketches. They restored a place that had once held Lucas's hopes, and in doing so, they restored something in themselves. As the sun dropped behind the trees, turning the lake gold, Aiden whispered, "Can we come back every week?" Joel looked at Ethan. Catherine looked at both of them. Ethan nodded, voice steady. "Every week, sweetheart. This cabin, it's part of our family now." Aiden smiled, and for the first time in a long time, they all felt something warm settle over them. Not healing, but the beginning of healing. A quiet, steady beginning.